Ojo, pues tú eres chico, imagínate las chicas con los vestiditos, ¿eh? Ahora que tenemos fuerzas renovadas después de la comida.
Now that we've recovered our energies, let me welcome you to this roundtable that is called Damage and Revenues of Gambling. And this is one of the several debates revolving around gambling. On the one side, the harm they cause on society, in particular on certain demographics, and of course compared to the revenues they generate. I'm the subdirector of the regulation of gambling at the General Directorate, and I am very pleased to be very well accompanied by Francisco Navas and Levi Pérez. And as an introduction, I just wanted to remind you about how these roundtables work. We are going to have two simultaneous roundtables. We're going to be here until more or less 5. You will be able to ask your questions via the QR code, and we'll have a debate. And then after at 5, we will have the main takeaways or conclusions of the two roundtables in the auditorium on the floor below, so that you won't miss anything at all. I wouldn't like to take further ado. I'm going to introduce you to the first speaker. It's Juan Francisco Navas, and we have Pérez, who works at the University of Oviedo. He's a member of the Counseling Roundtable for Gambling. He focuses on the economy of gambling, the analysis of lottery, and the analysis on prevalence and problematic gambling. He has also worked in the economy of behavior and leisure economy. He has more than 50 papers published in scientific magazines of renowned reputation. Thank you very much for this introduction. Well, my speech is called The Utility of Gambling, and maybe the first thing I should do, which is the same thing that I do with my students of the first year of economic analysis, is that the fact that something is useful, it doesn't mean that it's actually useful. It means that it just provides certain satisfaction to the person using that thing. So usefulness would be synonym to satisfactory. Since this Congress revolves about the social impact of gambling, I believe that social impact of gambling has both positive and negative connotations. In fact, when we analyze if a market for any product, and here of course we include gambling, generates a certain value for the society as a whole, what we analyze is if the social surplus of that market justifies the participation of individuals in such market. And in order to reach that conclusion, we need to make a balance between two aspects. One of them is the social cost, the negative impact, and the social benefit that would be the positive social impact. And all products, whether they are services or products, and we include gambling then, they provide both social benefits and harms. And this is very important for public policies, because if we find ourselves in a situation in which the social cost is higher than the benefit, then public policies need to focus on minimizing those harms. And so applies the opposite situation. So at the end, we will have a positive balance for the society as a whole, and this is our objective, of course. This is a very diverse roundtable, and I know that Fram is going to talk about social cost. I'm going to concentrate on the first circle, which is the social benefits of gambling, and that's why I'm going to be talking about the utility, the usefulness of gambling. Of course, that social benefit will depend on all of the agents that are involved in this market. We will find there operators, but also public administrations, and this is the so-called government in English. And then we'll find as well consumers. That means demand, supply, and regulators. The social benefit understood as a part of revenues generated. Of course, we're talking in economic terms. We will talk about all of the negative externalities. When we talk about social cost, well, when we talk about operators, we're talking about, of course, the benefits that revolve around employment, the demand of auxiliary services, as can be, for example, the hospitality sector and so forth. And I'm not going to focus on that either, because I'm sure José Antonio is going to make many more contributions in that sort of revenue or return. And then we have yields when it comes to taxation. I'm going to focus on a rather unknown part, which is the benefits for gambling consumers. When we talk about positive aspects of gambling, we usually focus on the industry that generates, I don't know how many, for example, jobs. And, for example, we tend to focus on taxation. And we say, for example, that this industry can benefit other industries as the tourism or hospitality industries, but the main return, the main yield is not there. It lies in the utility or usefulness for consumers. And if you want a more explosive term, or that generates more buzz, is the value of entertainment of this industry. So we're talking about the satisfaction that a consumer feels by the mere fact of gambling. And I'm going to focus on that. That's the concept of usefulness, satisfaction, well-being that it provides users. These are all synonyms. So it's the value of entertainment that a consumer gets by simply gambling. This satisfaction, this usefulness, is an individual concept. It depends on each person. I believe it has a hedonistic value. No, it's very difficult to quantify, no, because it provides pleasure, and if we want to translate it into a figure, that would make a very difficult process. And this is something that I would like to clarify from the very beginning. According to standard economic concepts, participating in gambling game was the main reason why a gambler would access a market in order to create this economic yield. This is true, but the main reason why a gambler gambles is that gambling provides certain well-being, satisfaction, entertainment value by the mere factor of participating in a game. This is an alternative hypothesis, and it's contained in a paper created by an American mathematician that actually passed away during the pandemic. And this article, this paper, is called The Utility of Gambling, and I recommend you all to read it. And I'm going to focus on this aspect, on the satisfaction, the return, the yield that it represents for consumers for the mere fact of gambling. So how can we measure or quantify this utility or satisfaction concept when we're talking about gamblers? The first question is, can we quantify it? Yes, we can. It's easy. Or the answer is no, it's very complicated because, of course, this is a concept that has hedonistic value, it's very subjective, and it's very difficult to quantify. In economy, we have a concept that quantifies this return, this satisfaction. That is what we call the consumer surplus, that within this field, I'm going to call the gambler surplus. The gambler surplus is a balance between the entertainment value, what we want to measure exactly, and the expected economic losses. You might say that there are other negative aspects beyond this, and it's correct. There are certain negative externalities revolving around gambling, particularly for problem gamblers, that go beyond individuals, that affect society as a whole, their social circles, etc. And of course, this is the case. But I'm not going to delve into that, friend. I'm going to focus on that, on the gambler's surplus, which is the entertainment value. And it's very important because once the gambler has their economic losses compensated, they think about what is the value left and what can be perceived as the entertainment value, as the satisfaction that is obtained for the mere fact of gambling. This is a work in progress, as we academics usually say. I've been entertaining this idea for a long time, but I haven't found a way to measure it or quantify it when it comes to the Spanish case. So what we've done so far is as analysis for many years of the concept of expenditure, because we found in literature that a way to value this entertainment value is by taking into account the expenditure. So what we have so far is a very wide study on the expenditure variable, and now we're looking for a methodology in order to measure that consumer surplus, that entertainment value, for the Spanish case. What we've done so far is a meta-analysis. The current papers and the current literature actually aim at measuring the surplus. There are some, not many, but there are. And over the last 25 years, we've identified 28 studies worldwide that try to measure that gambler surplus, that consumer surplus, to say in general terms. Bad news is that we don't have any for Spain. Good news is we might be the first ones to produce it. So we found studies for the US, Canada, Australia, and so forth. So countries that have a long tradition when it comes to gambling and that have huge concerns because of the social cost that it causes. And that's why they've been prone to measure these impacts. And we've found that the three main methodologies that have been applied in order to measure this entertainment value are, to start from the bottom, the analysis of revealed preferences. There it's the willingness to pay. So willingness to pay. How much are you able to pay, or are you willing to pay in order to gamble? So how much would they be willing to pay in order to access a casino, to place a bet? And this is like the analysis of revealed preferences that allow us to measure how much people are willing to pay in order to access a service by, for example, take it for granted they might not have it. For example, when we had Super Depor, there was a sporting club that was about to win. Well, they asked people, how much would we be willing to pay in order to place a bet? And that was a way in order to analyze or measure the satisfaction rate. But this, of course, implies a questionnaire that needs to be validated, that needs to have the purpose that has been conceived for, and this is a bit difficult in the Spanish case. The models of discrete choice have cross-cutting models, and the roadmap we're exploring right now are demand analysis that allow us to analyze, to calculate that consumer surplus once we know what is the demand of gambling by consumers. And this can be done by, for example, using values like expenditure in gambling and other elasticities. So we're here. What we've done is a meta-analysis using AI technologies that are very fashionable these days, because all of these studies use diverse methods. There are certain studies that use, for example, those revealed preferences analysis, other the discrete choice models. There is a lot of diversity. And of course, the measurements they have are different. Some measure, for example, how much consumers are willing to pay. And using AI technology, we tried to extrapolate what sort of indicators these studies aim at achieving. I'm sorry about this slide in English, but what we found is that the estimated consumer surplus calculated as a percentage by gambling expenditure is the one you have here. For general gambling, it amounts to 8%. In general terms, if you spend 100 euros in gambling, I think that 8% amounts to the entertainment value that it generates. And here we can discount, for example, the social cost that it implies for society as a whole and all of these negative externalities. But leaving those on the side and only focusing on a positive surplus, well, it will amount to 8%. And that entertainment value changes according to the kind of gambling. For example, lotteries have the highest entertainment value, surprisingly or not. Why? Well, because they provide the larger benefits, and when you buy, for example, a lottery ticket, you buy a dream. So since the very moment in which people buy the ticket and when the draw takes place, or there is a lot of entertainment because people get together with friends, they start to plan what they would do with the money, that's entertainment value. And the same applies to sports betting. There are studies that demonstrate that there's a complementarity between actually the enjoyment of sports and sports betting. Let's say, for example, that actually fans enjoy watching a game more if they have placed a bet. And this is how much I can say. So what we're trying to do is to use these models for the Spanish case and to see if those figures apply to our market or not with the use of AI technology. But in order not to leave you with a bitter aftertaste, I'm going to actually dare give you a figure for the Spanish case. This is a micro indicator. No, because when we're talking about an entertainment value, it's very subjective. So, for the Spanish case, with the prevalence questionnaire data, we have only 2 questions related to expenditure, one in person and another one online gambling, is what we have right now. So, what have we done here? We have ruled out all of those players that have actually problem risk indicators. So the only individuals that are concerned from the screening of the questionnaire are those that present no risks. So we've left only with those that are non-risky players so that we make sure that the surplus is positive, because risky gamblers, problem gamblers, could have risks that are higher than their satisfaction rate, and that has a much higher social cost. So we're only considering non-problem gamblers, and we've calculated their individual surplus. So the biggest part, here we have in gray in person and in green online, and the majority have an entertainment value below 4 euros a month. This can seem very little, but this is a figure that we have once we have discounted monetary losses. So it's below 4 euros a month. I believe that this is an underassessment to my mind, because 60% of those that responded to the questionnaire, they're planning to spend 10 euros a month, and this already represents a certain bias when it comes to the data. So as you can see from this threshold, well, all of online gambling provides more satisfaction than on-site gambling. But this, of course, taking for granted that the data that we had access before applies to the Spanish market too. And now we have macro data. I don't like working with macro data because, of course, gambling is very subjective, as I was saying before. But, well, that's what we have. So if we had to plan the entertainment value for all Spanish society as a whole, and this would be the maximum point of the interval. I've used data from the memory of the Juego of 2024, and the value of entertainment for the whole Spanish society amounts to 2,700 million euros. That's the social surplus that is, of course, over-assessed, overestimated, because this is macro data. We cannot actually factor them in according to individuals, and we cannot tell how much of the surplus corresponds to problem gamblers, but it's just to provide you with the 2 different appraisals. And here, of course, we corroborate what we had before, that is that lotteries are the ones that provide the highest satisfaction rate, entertainment rate. And then casinos, then we have sports betting. I've only taken in-person bets, and we would be talking about 90 million euros. This is what we have so far. As I was saying in the beginning, when we try to assess the social impact on an industry, we need to take into account social costs, but of course also the surplus. And that's been my perspective all my life. I'm going to say something positive about the industry. When the industry wants to justify its raison d'être, its reason of being, I think that should focus more on this, on the entertainment value of this product for recreational players or recreational gamblers, more than on employment figures and this other kind of data. And without meaning to be controversial, I'm going to wrap up here. Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Levi, and thank you for daring give Spanish figures. That was quite a leap. Now, on the other side of a coin, we're going to have Juan Francisco Navas. I think that many of you present over here know him already. He's a doctor in psychology. He's a professor of the clinical psychology and director of research of the University Clinic of Psychology of the University Complutense in Madrid. He's a member of the advisory board on gambling. He's published several papers on scientific magazines. He's taken part in different research studies regarding pathological gamblers, and he's actually published a book about gambling that is called Traps, and I encourage you all to read it. Well, I'm going to stand up if you'll allow me, because I wouldn't like to end up with a neck ache. So I'm part of a movement, a research movement, and we adhere to certain research practices, and we try to look for replicability of science. It's an open science model, and we usually start with a non-conflict of interest statement. So what I would like to say, first of all, is that all of the information that I have received for this research, I managed to get it thanks to competitive public tenders. So I would like to take this opportunity as well to express my gratitude to all of these organizations that finance this research. And we are free from influences when it comes to the design of the research and with regard to the takeaways that I'm going to share with all of you. I've taken the freedom to make this presentation. I haven't taken any freedom when I make use of data, because the data that I'm going to present you with was financed by a public tender as well. They will be present in an open repository. You can download it, you can contrast it, you can replicate it, and I think that this is interesting as well. So I've allowed myself some freedom is to use this information to make something a little bit more entertaining, because I understand that not everyone here present is a psychologist. So I'm going to use certain elements from psychiatry, from psychology, that I think are very useful when we use them in this context. And when they are taken out from that context, sometimes they are wrongly used or used in a confusing manner. So I would like to start from there. So that would be the first freedom I allowed myself. And if this works, Levi, you broke it. Okay, it takes a while, but it seems to be working now. Should I need to point there? Okay, please do not take this time into account. I need all my allotted time for this presentation. Okay, these are things that happen when we're live. So in the first slide, I tried to make a point about how we can measure risks of gambling when it comes to diagnostic manuals. We have those that come from the American Organization and the World Health Organization. And over here, for example, I include one of these manuals that I think it's interesting, and it's about losses. So when we try to figure out which are the problems, is, for example, we use descriptive terms, and this takes us to a problem. We try to calculate the other side of the issue. So what is the impact of the use of gambling? This is something that is recovered in scientific literature by using certain techniques, screening techniques, that are used in order to detect cases in the general population, but also to make medical decisions. With these tools, we include certain symptoms, but also consequences. For example, here, this would be a consequence. So, for example, has gambling caused you any health problems, including stress and anxiety? So we're including not only symptoms, but also negative consequences. When we use these instruments, these tools, the list of damage is rather short. And this has taken us to a growing movement that tries to assess gambling by measuring harm. And here I would like to show you different items when it comes to gambling that comes from not playing at all to the highest severity issue, which is a gambling disorder. Since we work in the field of prevention when it comes to gambling, what we try to do is to prevent people from gambling. And once that they do, what we try to do is to keep them to a minimum. And then at a given moment, if users have decided to gamble regularly, we try to make sure that they do so within a context in which harm does not get exacerbated. And that's why we try to establish where are the different pathways that would take users to develop more serious problems. Gambling needs to respond to certain symptoms. And we have different tools to assess those. So once that a specific level of symptoms is identified, we start talking about a disorder. And this is something that I like clarifying. Even though we use the terminology of mild gambling disorder, we are talking about a person, for example, that has certain symptoms, that has actually experienced a loss of control, and this can be severe. Of course, among psychologists and psychiatrists, we would call it mild, but I would like to say it's severe. Moderate would be more severe, and what is severe would be extremely severe, because I would be a person that has symptoms of addiction and is having enormous harms as a result. So the question that we try to answer is what impacts on risk behaviors, and that's where I try to focus. From which point is there a risk? Because, of course, when we're talking about risk, we're talking about likelihood. Once that, of course, people start gambling, they are already on the verge of having risk. And the concept of harm as well connects pretty well with the economy, because it tries to use terms that are common to different fields of medicine in order to try to assess how a certain condition can have an impact on health in terms of reduction of the quality of life. So it's a way to try to capture the harm of an activity and to make a comparison with other psychiatric problems. So I use a tool that I believe is one of the best, that is SGHS, and that's where we defined harm as any adverse consequence from mild to severe that results from gambling, that actually results in the reduction of health and well-being of an individual, of a community, all of population as a whole. Because, of course, we people will live in groups. We live in several groups, and what happens to one person can have a domino effect on others that it's important to measure. And what we try to do when we're talking about harms is to measure that global impact that gambling can have that is not circumscribed to a single person alone. And that would take us to see how that concept of problematic gambling gets expanded, and we try to capture other harm than the ones that we usually tend to refer to. And for those who are more skeptical, I actually include one of the most important authors, Matthew Brown, who works in Australia, and he created a very interesting report on Victoria, whose capital is Melbourne. He does studies in order to try to figure out what's the harm associated to gambling. He finds some very interesting data, because it says that for every euro that comes from taxation benefits, well, the state of Victoria needs to invest 7 to alleviate the harms. And we have as well very interesting work by Heather Wardle, who has chaired a commission of The Lancet, one of the most prestigious public health publications, and contains a lot of data that I believe it's very interesting, because when we're talking about global harm, we could say there is a 100.9% of people who gamble that could have harms when it comes to men, and 5.5% when it comes to women. And you can actually see the data, because for every person that has repercussions derived from gambling, there are 5% in their circle that suffers as well. So this is something you can contrast all of this data.
Harm as a concept, I'd like to explain it with this slide, which is taken from Brown 2016. And what this explains is that harm can happen at different levels. Firstly, we have a cumulative damage, cumulative harm. Crisis harm will be when someone loses control and has an episode, an event, a crisis event. Perhaps they start betting or gambling compulsively, and therefore harm goes out of the roof. Thirdly, is that sort of remaining harm when gambling is over. You got divorced, you went to jail, you lost your flat, etc. So they explain that there are 7 different areas that we can use to explain harm: family harm, psychological harm, health harm, cultural harm. And this last type, cultural harm, is not so usual. For example, gambling is frowned upon by certain religious groups, so this would be classified as cultural harm. These are the results from the Victoria study. They talk about the paradox of prevention. So we normally focus on the tip of the pyramid, people who have very serious problems, but there are fewer of them, okay? So we can find this in countries in our environment, and low-risk gamblers, we know that they are risky, obviously. This is the type of classification that we use for analytical purposes, but so this decrease that they have at an individual level is relatively low. And for example, if at individual level we have these utility weights, and this study calculates that, taking into account the proportion of people in each segment, 8.9 in this type of risk, low risk, 2.8 moderate risk, and 0.8 problem gambler. So when we calculate the aggregated harm, we see that the acceptance, the level of impact in the quality of life will be in these categories. So we can see this better in this diagram. I mean, people with a lower risk, which would be about 50% of harm caused by gambling, is in this type of people, whereas the paradox I was mentioning earlier would be the darker blue segment with 15.2%. And so perhaps we can think that these are not very many people, but below this we will find people with types of harms which have a higher degree of usefulness, of utility. Now, in this paper, in our study, we adapt this scale for calculating damage to our cultural environment. And for this purpose, with what we do is we use the common tool used for assessing stability at a national level. So we used 72 items, which would be the original checklist from which it derives the instrument that we are validating. And we compare it to the other 2 measures to see if with the other 2 we can have different indexes of losing quality of life. And this is what we do in the study. So the first part of the study, which we do, is would correspond to in these 72 original places, we calculate 12 using a genetic algorithm to see which ones give us a better summary of the harm caused by gambling. Now, we have these 12 items, which I think they are very interesting because they expand this concept of negative consequences to 5 of the 7 areas of damage, of harm that I was presenting earlier. I'm sorry, I'm going over this a bit quickly. So, for example, the first example would say I had health problems related to stress, such as high blood pressure, headaches, psychological damage. I feel anxious to gamble. I felt remorseful because I felt sorry because I was a gambler. So these are the types of problems that merit psychological therapy, psychological attention. Bigger conflicts in relationships, for example, I took money from my family, I stole things from friends or family members. We also have another type of damage would be work, professional or educational damage. For example, I lacked progression in my job or in my studies because I was lacking sleep and therefore I wasn't in the right position in the right conditions to study or to work. These are the figures. We include all the results here, and this is showing that our scale shows excellent from lower to excellent psychometrical measures. To finish up with, I will give you a couple of ideas on quality of life. So here on the vertical discontinuous line, we are representing quality of life. This measures quality of life. This in red with the red sign is general quality of life. And what we study is what predicts better the loss of quality of life. So, for example, the second family of instruments, of tools that I was saying earlier, PGSI, the second area of the scale, or the big checklist. We thought that the best was the checklist. It was a better predictor of loss of quality of life, of loss of quality of life, than PGSI. So what we use now, the 12 elements that we use, allow us to better capture the harm. In terms of in economic terms, we use the concept of health utility, which is the cost in terms of quality of life of gambling. This is compared to people who gamble. We are comparing people suffering damage with which is 40% of the population that we assess, and we compare it to the other 60%. And the people which in the list they say yes to one, they have an increase in health at this level. Of this level, we would interpret this, for example, 1 being the best possible health condition and 12 the worst possible health condition. So they suffer damages progressively, step by step, which reduce their quality of life or years lived with a poorer quality of life. Now, this would be the minimum threshold to sort of indicate something significant in healthcare sciences. This would indicate something significant. But just to finish with this data exposition, we see that from 1 to 12, we have 3 points in quality of life, meaning the higher the damage, the higher the impact of gambling in their lives. And to sum up my presentation, I will just give you a headline, which is that preventing damage derived from gambling cannot focus only on the most serious type of damage, nor on its effects on people individually. So we need to also consider its moderate impact and their subtle impact as well as the repercussions of gambling in the whole of society. Thank you so much. Okay, so we will now give the floor to the last speaker, who I think will give us a different point of view of this sector, which I think it's got many different angles. José Antonio Gómez Yáñez, he's a doctor in sociology, and he was a consultant to the presidency of the government. He has worked in Milburn Brown in Spain and has taught in the University Carlos III in Madrid. In terms of damage, I will talk about damage in economic terms as a substitute of cost profit. And I was going to tell you that there are certain words that are well-rounded, they are spheric, they are inoffensive. This could be a Fuji apple, so we're talking cost and profit, or or other types of apples as well. I'm sorry, I can't resist a practical example. So yeah, we were talking about angles rather than well-rounded objects. So cost and profit and benefit, damage, and I can't remember what else. See this? This is a cactus plant. This is similar to the other one. This is round. This is a vegetable as well. It's green, but this one has thorns. Sometimes words have picks, hooks, and thorns, and I am quite in agreement with what you have said, but my disagreement are healthy ones. I think that the benefits, the social costs and the social benefits of gambling go beyond what we were saying. So I am going to talk about cost and profit in economic terms. Sorry, this is not working. I've broken it too. Sorry, the slides are not moving.
Inhibidores puestos, Fran.
Sí, Fran, antes y después.
Esto como carura. Lo curioso es que lo toca él y vuelve a funcionar. Pero luego me vas a tocar. Ya está.
Ya está.
Vale. Bueno, yo...
Right, I am going to talk about cost. Right, I was nice to this remote control, but didn't really respond to me. Anyway, I was surprised by this poster. The interpreter apologizes, but she's lost the sound. Okay, and now it's back. Sorry, apologies. So we have the 11, yesterday, so we have the ONCE, which is the National Association for Blind People in Spain, and they have their own lottery, which is called ONCE. Yesterday, there was the 11th draw of the ONCE, which means 11 in Spanish. So this lottery ticket here includes a play on words. So the interpreter, again, cannot hear the speaker. The interpreter apologizes. There seems to be a problem with the sound. Economy, as Levi said, has problems to understand, struggles to understand this. Samuelson, for example, he has influenced very many economists in the whole world, and he said that gambling is the sterile transfer of money without gaining money or new goods, and it absorbs money and resources. So I'd say that from sociology, we can better understand these homo ludens, this man who plays, because this is rational, and I have a very complicated relationship with this. So I'll try to give you an idea of this. So the difference the difference between the money played in gambled in Spain is it represents about 0.8% of 8% of GDP in Spain. From this, 50,000 gamblers are in entertainment games gambled, and employment in this is mostly female. Also, slot machines transfer this cost to casinos to about 20 or 30%. If they were to disappear, a whole lot of businesses would disappear too. So these entertainment companies pay 1 billion euros per year, as well as taxes and social contributions. Gambling pays 200 million per year, and this is a final tax. So where is corporate social responsibility in gambling? I don't want to offend anybody, but special taxes on gambling, these 1.2 billion, including online gambling, include the cost. They go directly to the cost of 50,000 kidney transplants, for example, as well as the civil administration of the state in terms of maintaining roads, railways, etc. So how much is the cost of prolonging life for a number of years for thousands of people? Or what is the cost of reducing car crashes on roads? I think it's unfair to not acknowledge this element of corporate social responsibility in gambling. Gambling has 30 million customers, generating 1.3 billion. So I think that this singular operator, which is the only one of its kind in the world, plays a very significant role in social integration of people, blind people and people with disabilities in Spain. I'm talking about the National Association for the Blind, the ONCE. So let's look at customers now, at people who are actually gambling. This gambling pays an assessment on the habits of gambling in Spain, and this assessment is carried out in the second fortnight of January, or the first one in February. Why? Because they want to gather all the information related to the Christmas lottery draw in Spain. Now, this has a very particular sort of characteristic if we compare Spain to any other country. So we spend about a fourth of what other countries are spending, which has an impact in indicators. According to this data, to this study, 30 million people play the Christmas lottery in Spain every year. With ages between 18 and 75 year old. So these people, not all of these people would go to a gambling room or a bingo or a casino or this type of business. Some people do that, and some people also use slot machines. More than 2 million gamble online in 1 year, and every month we have 1 million gambling online. So in Spain, for example, in Ceuta, online gambling employs 1,000 people, which is 9% of GDP. In Melilla, the data is a little bit lower.
En este universo de millones,
So within this universe, we have 8,200 people that are being treated because of problematic gambling, and this is information that we have from the health minister. So we have a percentage of the population. We have more than 85%, according to psychiatry studies that were published over the last years in Spain. More than 83% have other disorders, possibly prior to the disorders resulting from gambling. So these are people that have problems related to gambling, not because of gambling. So World Health Organization believes that it's a rare disease if there is a rate below 0.0% of the population. And these 8,200 people, they represent 3.3% of the population that are receiving treatment because of substance abuse or consumption. In Spain, too, the incidence of problematic gambling has a decreasing trend. Until the year 2000, there were studies in charge of different researchers in different communities. And the results were strange. There were ups and downs. From 2007, we had a study in Catalonia, another 0.2, in Galicia 0.3, and then from 2011, 2012, this is a series chaired by me, problem gambling because of DSM and PSHE is about 2%. I believe that it's unquestionable percent, and even the study within ages states that the rate of problem gambling amounts to 0.3%. So without meaning to be controversial, 15.2% of gamblers from 12 and 18 years have obesity problems. We're talking about some 6 million people. Out of these figures, I think I start wondering about something that we need to solve. I'm not talking about whether they are 0.3% or 8,200. I think that these are pretty low figures, but we need to start asking ourselves questions, because we need to ask ourselves if it's reasonable that all of the debate and regulation on these topics revolves around technology, problem gambling, vulnerable people. I believe that this doesn't make much sense. I believe that there are many more interests within this industry that we need to analyze. So what do those 30 million users get in exchange of their expense in gambling? Well, who play the lottery, the big lotteries, well, they have a sense of excitement because they are given the impression they can win a big prize. I imagine that many of you have a Christmas lottery ticket that you were given or that you bought. And this imaginary excitement has value to these people. Another engine for the lottery, the Christmas lottery, is preventive envy. No, for example, if someone gets the prize and you haven't bought the ticket yourself, or something even worse. I like bars, I go to bars, and all of a sudden say, would you like a lottery ticket? And maybe you say, okay, if they get the prize, I'm going to end up without a share. And this is sort of a dynamic in which we all participate. The big Christmas lottery is a network of relationships among 85% of Spaniards. We buy lottery tickets, we share it with friends. But let me tell you something. With these draws, we finance clubs, associations, local groups of the far right and the far left. We finance trade unions and a series of associations that revolve around the revenues obtained because of gambling, and particularly this Christmas lottery. And it's a chain that covers 30 million people. Some years ago, in a moment of political effervescence, we saw that certain people who were implied in certain events in a community, they didn't buy the Christmas lottery, but they did buy another lottery that was sold in that community. So the Christmas lottery is a cohesive element in our country. Only 40 or 50% of those who have economic problems play or buy a Christmas lottery ticket. But they, for example, don't take part in the 11 draws. They don't gamble. They don't go to casinos. They know that in those places, they're running risks because people are quite rational. I just wanted to say that Spain is one of the countries with the lowest problem gambler rate. It's something that we should be happy about. We shouldn't torture ourselves with this problem. There is a hidden cost, no, which is the decrease of understanding gambling in the present literature. Human beings play out of entertainment, and they demonstrate that they know how to play. Greek soldiers used to entertain themselves by playing board games, as we can see over here. And the National Museum of Roman Art in Mérida, we have a board that dates back to Roman times. It must have some 2,300 years. And in Spain, some 2,000 years ago, according to studies by historians, people played already, gambled already, and pretty much all across the Spanish territory. So this is a characteristic, a feature, really, of the Spanish population. Ever since the American Association of Psychiatry included in its DSM a questionnaire to measure gambling disorder, the literature has become medicalized. It seems that all people who gamble, it seems that everyone gambles, and I believe that this is a misconception. I don't think we can say comfortably that we have 36 million people who have gambling problems in Spain. The coordinator of DSM-4, Ellen Francis, published this book criticizing seriously what had been done with DSM-5. We've created a diagnosis system that turns everyday problems in mental disorders. Aldous Huxley, as you know, it says that medicine has gone so far that nobody's healthy anymore. So I believe that we are overemphasizing harms for sure. Over the 60s and 70s, there was scientific literature that tried to understand gamblers. It's something that we're not doing nowadays. Gamblers are rational. They know how to gamble. They know they do so because of entertainment purposes at a reasonable price. The millions of people who play the lottery every week with coupons, etc., they do so that they can believe in the goddess of fortune. It's the expectation of prospective pleasure. I believe in the 80s, it was proved that people who place bet in horse rides, they knew a lot about horse races. In Spain, we knew that who gambled knew the gambling games a lot. And what they wanted to demonstrate is that they were better than the ones who gambled with them, not to make money. I believe in those skilled games, winning means that we are demonstrating that we're better than the rest. And this gambling provides a sense of pride to gamblers who have won, and everyone has experienced this. Once they've won a game of poker, it's for sure a satisfactory feeling. I'm going to tell you something that I'm sure you don't know. The author of this book thinks about football. That was the one who brought the bets from Sweden in 1947. And he said that even having a mild win is enough to give people the feeling that they are experienced, because it allows people to have an opinion about the game. So, of course, sports betting are about making comments about games, and it's enough to see people getting together how, when they place a sporting bet, they relate to one another. Gambling implies social relationships. I believe that most people who go to casinos, they go with people, they go there to meet other people who share their same interests.
Y quienes juegan a las máquinas en los
And those who play slot machines in bars, they do it so that they can maybe get lucky with the little change they have or to spend time. I believe that slot machines provide them with some distraction time. Everybody knows that nobody is going to get rich by playing the slot machines. Those who play online have an average, they spend an average of €3 a day. But this has a singular feature, that 20% of their customers win. Look at that. These are existing data. I've just included it in a chart. When you gamble, sometimes you lose, sometimes you win. So 20% of those who play online win. They don't win much. Well, more or less. 4 or 5%, they make more than €1,000. If this is true, it's true as well that losing more than €3,000 is a lot. But of course, we should try to find out who are the people who can afford to lose more than €3,000. I tell you, if I did, I would be in trouble. So I imagine that the people who are losing more than €3,000 is because they can. And I believe it would be interesting to analyze where these people live. There's an unexpected return that amazed me. A study that was carried some years ago said that most of the Christmas lottery prizes were invested in rural houses or in business activities in a rural ecosystem. So what's the value of this relationship? It's not that individual consumers need to assess. There are more elements. Those that go to the bingo rooms, they go to see their friends. The people who go to casino, they don't usually go with friends, but they go there to meet people who share their interests. So gambling provides relationships, and these relationships are those weak bonds, as we call them in sociology, that can result not only relationships, but work opportunities as well. And there's something here that I would like to share with all of you. This is Edgar J. Hoover. He was the director of the FBI, and look at what he said, and it really looks like many things that we usually hear. And it says that gambling is a vicious, malign sin that corrupts our young people and ruins the life of adults. Thank you very much, José.
Bueno, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for those questions. I wouldn't like to act as a censorship agent here, so allow me to ask a couple of questions, and I'm going to ask speakers to keep it short. The first question maybe focuses more on Levi's presentation, because there are some questions that actually ask about which are what does it mean when we talk about economic reparation? The economic reparation of harm. I don't know who would like to get started. Well, economic reparation of damage or redress of damage, I don't know, maybe Fran should answer that question. I believe it would entail quantifying harm, as Fran was pointing out. There are charts by insurance companies. The most well-known are, for example, the reparation of damages because of traffic. We have an official chart where the different kinds of harm are assessed, and this is pretty standardized, particularly because it gives place to different trials, so it needs to be standardized. I am very old, even though I may not look like it. I'm going to ask a second question. In the economic analysis of gambling, I miss a reference of opportunity costs that are particularly exacerbated in these gambling fashions that are highly addictive. I believe we should emphasize more on the fact that taxation revenues are much lower than the medical expenses when related to gambling. I believe that I've learned a lot from you. How to distract attention and how can I overcharge working memory. So I'm going to copy your trick of the cactus and the apple that I believe is very interesting in order to talk about this. No, I just wanted to be photographer, keep on distracting our audience's attention. I believe that what's important when we're talking about data is to mention the sources, because when we mention the sources need to have public access, open source. When we have figures, they need to be easy to understand. And once we use public data, we need to actually refer to the chart that was used officially. Because if I provide 15 figures, nobody understands. This is something that I do on a daily basis when I teach at university. I see that if I provide them with too many figures, actually my students collapse. So I believe that the debate that we should have here is a lot more serious. And another thing that I've learned that I think is very interesting is the concept of utility or usefulness by Levi, because I believe the most useful kind of gambling would be the gambling that would find this balance, that would maximize that part that Levi was focusing on. Sporting bet have less economic usefulness than lotteries. Then, for example, we should make sure that sporting bets should be more similar to lotteries so that we can maximize the positive aspects of this kind of gambling. And within this context and with that data, I believe that we can have a constructive debate. I'm going to copy an idea from a colleague that works in communications, Professor Levi Lopez Fernandez, who works a lot on happy gambling. How should we design gambling games so that people can actually enjoy them? And he provides an example. We know that gambling that is becoming faster and faster generate more harm, and this is data that can be accessed from different sources. For example, slot machines. The slot machines, they cause more harm than lotteries. So in this case, we shouldn't include designs in gambling games to be faster, because that kind of product is more harmful. And we know already that the faster the game, the more the hypnotic state in which consumers get, and that's when the harms are maximized. So I think that in this debate we should talk about that. If we know that there are harms and there are elements that produce more harm, we should try to work so that the existing offer in gambling takes into account these elements so that we can also maximize economic utility. And there would have margin to work for a better industry. José Antonio, you wanted to say something? Taxation, no, with regard to medical expenses, it's not true. I believe that in Spain, I believe that most of the health expense actually regards senior citizens. If we have 8,200 problem gamblers, if psychiatrists are a bit desperate because they have so many questions about gambling, when they have so many patients, I don't know. Let me insist. I won't go much further because I don't think I should, but it's important to understand that the health cost of gambling in Spain is very limited. And that's okay because it's something that actually public administrations have achieved by setting limits. I don't know if you are up to date with the news about gambling, but the story... Are there minors in gambling rooms? No. Secondly, gambling rooms are in poor neighborhoods. Would you take a walk with me around here? There's one in Alcalá, another one here in O'Donnell. So this is the only study that we could see around the world that doesn't find that distribution. So let me doubt it. In Zaragoza, there's a research group that has clearly demonstrated that link. When we, for example, do analysis of gambling rooms density, and we're talking, for example, about effects, mainstream effects, the fact that they're located in certain places, we find this link of these vulnerable, poor neighborhoods and the gambling rooms. So please do share this data. We need to have access to this raw data. We can see how this data is analyzed so that we can actually work together and we can reach agreements. We have open source data. Let's all agree on that so we can get together and debate and on the fact of why Madrid is a different example in the world. I believe that a debate at this level among academics requires a minimum levels. Otherwise, we can continue talking in other places, because I think that here we have people that are interested, people who are following us from the comfort of their homes. So we need to be talking about reliable data. There's no study around the world. So please, you need to have access to raw data. Yes, these are data that come from the General Directorate of Gambling of the Community of Madrid. And I believe that this data from the Community of Madrid. Well, I'd be delighted to have personal access to this data. I would love to be able to support that data. Well, thank you very much. I'm so sorry. I'm going to wrap up, but I've been given a warning already. I'm going to share my takeaways in the plenary session, so I invite you all to go down there, allow us a couple of minutes to just write them down, and then we'll have access to the takeaways in the plenary session. Thank you very much, everyone.